DC tracking episode 4. Okay, so now there hasn't been too much development since the last video. It's been a bit of a slow week so far, but as you can see, I'm trying something a little bit different here. So just on the macro picture on the high time frames, what you can see is these horizontal rays that are bold. They're kind of mapping out my key longer term levels. So we've got this level over here, which pretty much is the underside of this lower swing high that I do expect price to come back up to at some point, 42,000 to test after breaking and now retesting it for potentially a lower high for further downside. However, also we can see that we've got the left shoulder up here and then the lows at 30,000. So not too much of a change in that sense. It's just using a different tool. But on the more micro picture here, I've just mapped out the high and low of the previous week. Okay, so instead of waiting for all of this big price action to play out, which will take several weeks to months, focusing on more of the intra-week cycles, if you will, to capitalize on the movements. So jumping down to the daily, we're actually approaching a pretty significant region of interest on this pair, and the way that we're actually approaching it too is pretty important. So if we sling a fib from A down to B, so we've got A, B, we didn't actually come up to 38.2 for that B wave unless we map it down to here, where we just came up C at the 38.2, but then we've come down and we've been stalling on that negative 27 Fibonacci extension. So we broke below, got people stuck on the wrong side, came back up, liquidated these lows, and now we've just been holding this as support. Okay, so expecting at the very least price to come back up and retest these lows up in here as a structure, which also aligns with that 42,000 level, $42,000 resistance level. But if I draw your attention now to the third touch of this trend line here, you can see that price has come up ever so slightly, rejected this, and now we've come back down. If we look at the way prices got there, it's very slow, very low momentum. There's lots of wicks. It's very range bound, very choppy. There's really not much intent behind any of these moves in any direction. And I believe the reason for that is just because, we're gearing up for a big movement. You can see the same thing happened here, it's just very choppy like this, and then bang, we got the volume come into the market to the downside. In this instance, what I do expect, however, is for potentially price to just break out of this, and then we get some solid momentum down, maybe test these weekly lows here before forming a double bottom, liquidating 1, 2, and 3 before driving back up into this region here on the daily, which is going to be that serves that break and retest lower high, true lower high, and this can be kind of like a little manipulation level, liquidity resting above it, if you will. What we can also see is if I just clear all of these up here, we've got the prior week. We got the prior week's high here, which today actually broke up through, but now we're struggling to close above and sustain. So we've got an hour and 50 minutes left until the closure, which would be pretty pivotal, because if we get closures above and also out of this trend line, it may give us an indication we may get a big drive up into the highs before then rolling over potentially. But the lower time frames are going to paint the picture. And if I now come down to the 4 hour, we get rid of, I'm just going to clear these up just so that we can focus more so on the trading range at play. So we've got weekly high of last week here, and we've got the low of last week here. So this is our range that we're playing in, and we're basically just taking out and testing above the highs. And what's happened also, we can confluence that with the 1, 2 trend line. We broke out and now we've come back up and we're retesting, but we're actually struggling here at this intersection point. So what I'm expecting is, now that we've liquidated this high, I'm expecting price to come down and test potential levels of support, maybe around a few of these high swing lows. So at the moment, we can see that we are actually in this range here. This is our range that hasn't actually been tested. So this will just be an inflection point here, 37,000. I do expect that one to be breached, come back up, potentially retest, and then continue momentum down into 35,000, taking out these lows before potentially looking for that retest and then down into lower or back up into the range. So what we're doing now is obviously for a range to form, we need 4 points, you know? So we've got 1, 2, range is kind of set, and now the higher the range is going to get taken out, and then that's going to signify we're going to go down and test the bottom of this range potentially. So that's the way I'm playing this. I'm going to play the capturing of the liquidity at the top of the range and trade that back down to the bottom. We can confluence that with the trend line retest that's holding up here. We've got multiple 4-hour candles not sustaining to the upside. We've got the wick here mapped to the wick. We've got 1, 2, 3 drives, shooting star, and now we're coming back up just to retest potentially. So first downside target of this is going to be that inflection point, but ultimately I'd like to hold it down to the 35,500 level. We may get some spikes down below these lows here as well, but ultimately, to be fair, we've got this level here, an inverse head and shoulders, which is still open because we came down, made the left shoulder neckline, head, and then came all the way up, broke this structure here, but we actually haven't retested this level here. It's still open, if you will, and we've got lots of liquidity resting below here. So there's every reason for price to come all the way back down to 34,500, and then at that point, you know, we may as well just come and probe these lows here at 32,800, which is then going to line up nicely with that 3 drives to the lows back on the daily, like I was explaining just here. So we've got the 1 drive, 2 drive, and then this could literally be just one massive dive into the lows before ripping back to the upside, targeting at the very least 41,500. So intraday, I'm actually short now. So what we had is lots of consolidation on Monday. Okay, so multiple sessions, and then today London came up, liquidated Asia, and yesterday evening price action came up, came back down, also liquidated the highs, took out the lows here, and then New York came up, pretty much respected London, okay, but just still choppy. But what we can see is that 4 hour here was pulled from the weekly high as well. So that's the weekly high of last week, and that was kind of the approach that I was looking for, is just to see if we can sustain above it. So when I saw that we got the liquidation of this range, I actually did end up getting short on a 30-minute. I did get short on this candle here, and obviously this wick has now since been filled, and then we made a high-low, and then we came out and we took out the London and also New York highs. So this was kind of the highest of the highs for me, where there's no more liquidity resting above it. And given that we've taken out 1, 2, and now 3 drives into the highs, taking out stops, I got tagged in on this 15-minute candle that closed back below the wick of London high, and also just basically on that that weekly. So this was the refinement to that previous week high. So what we can see now is that price has come down. We've made our low, but we've been met at that little support level just here, which for me is a decent sign, because now we've got, let me just clean out these charts a little bit too. Okay, that's better. So not only do we have liquidity resting below these lows here, we also got all of this still empty space as well. We've got empty space down to here. We had structure came up, London made a high, and then boosted all the way through, but we've not actually yet retested. You can see that we've got a few 15-minute candles here that did retest, but nothing significant. So to me, this area is still outstanding. So once we got those 3 drives to the highs, and 1, 2, 3, we closed back below London high with the 15-minute candle formation. I got short. So we now got the high, low, looking for that lower high, and we've got this trend line 1, 2 breaking through. It's actually mapped to the 30-minute, which will make it a bit clearer. Okay, so we got 0.1, 0.2, and now price is broken out of it, found our support here, and now come up, retested once, twice, 3 times. Now we're on that 4th drive to the high. If we can also see, we've got one left shoulder, head, right shoulder. I do expect it to come back up from that right shoulder before then rolling over to the downside. So this is one that I'm going to be holding for the medium to long term. So first target being previous London highs from 38, call it 39,000 down into 37 to 50. Okay, being aware here, taking partials. But if we wanted to run this down for a larger swing, okay, so if we're getting in up here, this is really messy now, but so we have inflection point here, first proper target 35,800, which this position here would be 7 to 1 to the basically the first target if this is the high. So partials at the first, and then if we were to show price action convincingly break below the 35,800 region, we can even drag that all the way down into the lows for this open structure, inverse head and shoulders for about a 10 to 1. So I don't really want to be choking it up here. I am confident in holding this trade for the longer term just to see where we can run it down. So we're focusing on the 4 hour for management, but as we can see, we're actually holding this quite nicely. So I do expect this to be a lower high before then continuing to the downside. But we'll track this one as time goes on.